Thank you.
Today it's an unusual day. In addition to all of the losses we've had and all of the people who've been ill, I think it would be reasonable if the if I welcome Rabbi, that maybe it would be worthwhile to since many of us have been touched also by what's been happening in the Ukraine. I thought in Ukraine, not the Ukraine. My Sue's grandfather and my grandfather were Ukrainians. They were children when they came. They were escaping the pogroms. What we're seeing now, we're seeing now is a replay of the Russian pogroms. There's a reason why the Chechens are the shock troops going into the Ukraine. Ukraine has a very large Jewish population. The Chechens are the Islamic region that wanted to secede from Russia, and then Russia sustained them because they wanted to maintain ties with Iran, which is just on the other side of Chechnya. This is going to be, Russia has already made statements about Israel getting out of the Golan Heights. It is a direct threat to Israel to stay out of this, even for humanitarian reasons, because Russia has maintained very close ties with Iran. And so we need to be very careful. It is a very complicated situation. And I think, since I see Rabbi Norman, Pastor Bruce, I would invite you to say a few words on a number of these issues because of the threat. I can say that there was an extremely moving video of a Ukrainian woman holding a baby and two children next to her. And I don't know how many of the news stations carried this, but if you have a chance, watch it. It is very, very important to see and hear and feel what those people are going through. So with that, I'm going to ask the Rabbi and Pastor Bruce to say a few words, and if there are any prayers or anything else that people want to say before we get involved in our Torah study, I think it needs to be said now, especially with limited time. Yes, Rabbi.
Marty, I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate the fact that we're taking an extra couple moments. I would implore us not to get involved in discussing the politics in this framework.
Okay.
Okay. All right. There are many people who might immediately disagree with some of the things that you had said. So let's leave that out of it. Keep it with Torah in the largest sense. And let me, as soon as you started speaking, I thought, and I reached for my phone to find this prayer that was written by one of my colleagues, Rabbi Cy Stanway. So I quoted in his name, but I think it's a beautiful statement. Our God and God of all people, if words could stop war, we would speak them endlessly. If words could heal wounds, we would sing them throughout the day. If hate could be forever extinguished with the waters of love and respect, we would gladly create a tsunami of them. But words can only remind us of who we are and of what we can be. We are not war, we make war. We are not peace, we make peace. We are not hate, we hate. We are not love, we love. We are at the mercy of those who seek power to dominate and possess, and yet we see bravery, determination, unity, strength, and fortitude. This is the tsunami of what will unify and bring peace. Peace does not come through a gun, only silence. The silence of the dispossessed, the oppressed, and the dead. We seek a greater peace. Oops, I lost it. I'm sorry. We seek a greater peace that silence, a silence spoken about by the prophets, and a peace that we know can grow in the hearts of everyone. On this Shabbat, help us to grow our hearts, to see the love that can be, the peace that can be, and make us, O God, your arms and minds. Our words do not move you to do for us, but we speak them to you so that we can listen to each other. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you. Pastor Bruce, did you want to say a few words?
I do. I'm going to read Psalm 3. O Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of me, God will not deliver him. But you are a shield around me, O Lord. You bestow glory on me and lift up my head. To the Lord I cry aloud, and he answers me from his holy hill. I lie down and sleep. I wake again because the Lord sustains me. I will not fear the tens of thousands drawn up against me on every side. Arise, O Lord. Deliver me, O my God. Strike all my enemies on the jaw, break the teeth of the wicked, for from the Lord comes deliverance. May your blessing be upon your people. And
Amen.
I've been praying a lot of Psalms over the last 3 or 4 days, specifically in regards to this. Ukraine has, I believe it's 75 to 80% Jews and Christians in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's been heavy on my heart and I've wept a lot.
Yeah.
Marty, if I may,
Yes.
one last thing. I'm going to send out this afternoon. A number of people have reached out asking, are there specific organizations that are helping the Jewish community or the larger community? I'm going to send out a list of connections and places where people can donate if they will, and find further information. I know that Gail had specifically asked. I do have a colleague with whom I and many of the other liberal rabbis in North America, we've had experience with Rabbi Alexander Duchovny, who's based in Kiev. He's the last announcement that I had, he was still safe. Most of the members of his congregation with whom he's in contact are safe. Some are leaving the area, but he's hoping, God willing and whatever, at the end of Shabbat to post, or whether it's a FaceTime kind of thing or a YouTube, but he's hoping to post something tonight, his time, after the end of Shabbat. So if there's more to share, I'll certainly do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyway, yeah. So David is not going to be able to be with us for a long time this morning. So I'm going to turn things over to him to do his usual reading.
Can I say something?
Of course, Michael.
Sure. But can I just let David do it, because he has a very limited time now before
Okay.
and then you can say something, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Marty. Today is more of a poem dedicated to peace. I'm going to quote today from Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare. One of the most famous quotations from that entire play. And that quotation right now is written on the moon in memory of Gene Shoemaker. And it goes like this. Come, gentle night. Come, loving, black-browed night. Give me my Romeo. And when he shall die, take him and cut him out into little stars. And he will make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with night and pay no worship to the garish sun. Thank you, and back to you, Marty.
Thank you. Thank you. That will dovetail a little bit into some of what we're going to be reading today. Michael.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with your opening remarks, Marty. I didn't find anything political really in there. And I appreciated those opening remarks very much. And the remarks, of course, from the rabbi and from the pastor.
Thank you, Michael. Well, with that, let me read our opening prayer. And I'm going to read it in Hebrew. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen. Well, we are going. There was a reason for stopping last week because there are changes in the program. There are changes in the program. And so with that being said, I'm going to ask somebody to read verses 1 through, well, just start reading in it, and I'll mention when to stop. Go ahead.
Marty,
Yes.
if you could just mention book, chapter, and verse.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Exodus 12, verse 1.
Okay, let me do that because I'm going to have to be leaving soon if you don't mind.
Okay.
Okay. And the Lord spoke unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man, and I suppose now I would say every person, according to his or her eating, shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats. And ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And they shall take of the blood and strike it on the 2 side posts and on the upper doorpost of the houses, wherein they shall eat it. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden it all with water, but roast with fire, his head with his legs, and with the protrusions thereof. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning. And that which remaineth of it until the morning, ye shall burn with fire.
Okay. That's very good. I don't want to get too far ahead because first, any comments about what David has just read? Anything sound strange?
No, but I want to say that's the only way to do lamb.
That's what?
It's the only way to do lamb is to have a roast lamb, you roast leg of lamb. Or,
Yeah.
Any comments about verse 1 or verse 2?
Yeah, I was going to ask that we have so many New Years. There's the New Year at Yom Kippur, and there's the New Year here, there's the New Year of the trees, and there's the New Year, So which is the real New Year?
Okay, yes, Rabbi.
They're all New Year's. Okay? They're all called Rosh Hashanah
Right.
in the literature. The Rosh Hashanah that we observe in the fall is actually the first day of the seventh month.
Mhm.
That's the year that we change from now 5782. Next year will be 5783, etc., which is supposedly the anniversary of the creation of the world. So it's the new year of the world. Sunday schools, we call it the birthday of the world. We have our birthday. Rosh Hashanah is the birthday party for the world. Okay.
Mhm.
Then Rosh Hashanah Ilanot is the new year for the trees. It starts the
Right.
planting season. Then Rosh Hashanah, um, the Simchat Torah is considered a Rosh Hashanah. It's the new year of the Torah, if you will. And then this particular the beginning of the spring month, the spring month, which in the Torah is called Aviv, but later on becomes Nisan. That becomes the year month number one. That's January, if you will, in the Gregorian calendar. Month number one for the counting of the months. But it's the month not only that celebrates the independence, liberation of the people, but also all of the ordinations, all of the coronations, all of those took place in the spring month. It's like, so the first day of the month of Aviv or of Nisan is like January 20th, where that's the inauguration day. Everything goes and is counted from there. That help, Ricky?
No, I knew there were all the months, but but you were saying there are many new months, new years with each month. So that means there's 12 or 13 per year. We just have to name them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in the Torah, they're called by their number.
Right. Okay.
The first day, first day of the first month, the 15th day of the seventh month, whatever it might be.
Okay.
I have a question regarding
Yes, please,
verse
David.
3. It says in the 10th day of this month, and they're talking about take to them every man a lamb, and he's giving instructions about preparing the lamb for eating. However, what bothers me about it is that that's Yom Kippur. We're supposed to be fasting.
It's not Yom Kippur. That's Yom Kippur is in the seventh month, and this is the first month.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay.
What do they do when there's two Adars? About the first of the whichever month.
The holiday, which is Purim, is deferred to the second Adar. The first Adar 1 is the extra month. That's the leap month.
Oh,
is Adar
I
1.
would have thought Adar 2 would have been, but that's okay. That's me.
We like to do things differently.
So it becomes interesting. So we have to be. It says the beginning of the month. It shall be the first month of the year for you. And if we have several times during the year when there are new years celebrated, okay, new births, new beginnings celebrated, if we wind up taking this bit of information that each it represents a new birth, and how many years then can occur within one solar year.
Well, that's
by this measurement.
12 or 13. 12 or 13, wouldn't it be?
Well, what I'm saying is that assign it to the year of time with the time span between the holidays, and you come up with what is it, four or five celebrations like that? Does that change the time frame within which we are talking about a lifespan? Can someone live a whole solar year and yet have lived 4 years?
4? Oh,
If you go by this type of definition, I don't know. I just don't know if that's ever been discussed. I do know that from at that time in world history, all the way through the Middle Ages, until calendars were very disjointed. We really do not know what year this is. It was by convention. There were multiple calendars in ancient times. If you go to the museum at the Vatican, they have multiple calendars, each one representing the lifespan of a particular king or some other significant person. And it's hard to know where we really are in the scheme of things, time-wise. So so the Gregorian calendar comes along, and by convention now it's being used, and so we can say, okay, as per the Gregorian calendar, but we shouldn't really say that this is the year 2022. We really don't know if it's 2022 or 1922 or 2322. Depends on which sequence of calendars you are going to count. Yes, go ahead. Rabbi, please.
Yeah, Marty, I was a little confused by where you were going with this, but I just wanted to point out two things so that people aren't overly confused. The 4 different Rosh Hashanah days that I was talking about before are not all mentioned in the Torah.
Right.
Okay? They may be identified in the Torah, but not as a Rosh Hashanah. It's rabbinic literature adds the term Rosh Hashanah. The Rosh Hashanah on which we blow the shofar is not called Rosh Hashanah in the Torah.
Right.
Okay, it's Yom Teruah. It's a day of blowing the shofar. It's a day of memoriam, things like that. So the title comes later. The other thing is that in the Bible, there's no attempt to provide the number of years since creation or whatever. They talk in terms either of the X number of generations, which, as we all know, sadly might be brief or might be longer, but the generations in a particular family, or in the years of the reign of such and such a king. Okay, so it's not identified. Well, so and so Melchizedek became king in 2175 BCE, and he ruled until it doesn't do it that way. They just talk about the years of the reigns.
Right. And so it can add some. I just tossed that out as adding another level of, as you say, confusion.
right.
How can, there are some people who are going to take it literally that certain people have calculated lifespans as mentioned and like that. But it's still, we have to be very careful as we start discussing these things. Yes, Suzanne.
Just to add another wrinkle to this conversation. Yeah. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Essenes, I don't know how to say it, I guess, claim to have used the original calendar that God gave, which was based on a solar, not lunar, which is what the Hebrew calendar is using now. And the people who have done work in translating and, whatever goes into figuring out calendars, the determination is that we're coming into the final Jubilee, which will be in our calendar year 2025. So that would make this year 5946. And also with the solar calendar, the holidays always fall on the same day of the week. And it's a 364 day calendar. And then I guess they have to add a week. Well, I guess that's every 7 years that have to add a week, for leap year. So I find that very interesting. And the Essenes claim that the Pharisees were the ones who changed it from the solar to the lunar. Now, why that is, I don't know.
Okay. Any other comments? I just thought bringing in some other little angle here to discuss it may interest some people. Yes, Michael.
Okay, I don't want to take this away, but I would like to ask the rabbi a question, and I don't want to deter from what we're talking about. But if I may, Marty, please.
Okay. Well, I don't know what you're going to ask. So.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to, Rabbi. I want to ask you this question because you mentioned the blowing of the shofar in reference to the calendar. Is there a difference between sounding the shofar and blowing the shofar?
No. Those terms would be synonymous.
Thank you.
Okay.
But the mitzvah, incidentally, the commandment is not to blow or sound the shofar. The mitzvah is to hear it. The mitzvah is actually pay attention to the sound of the shofar.
Correct.
Yeah.
That I know.
Okay. Any other comments about that? I think we've spent enough time. I'm not going to bring up other comments on this, but we've covered them in general. Any comments about the sacrificial or paschal lamb? Yes, Rabbi.
Okay. For those who don't know, the word paschal comes from Pesach. It's the translation from Pesach or Passover, the verb to pass over. Having said that, I always like to spend a few minutes wondering, and the Eitz Chaim commentary gets into it also, of what was the purpose of putting the blood on the doorposts? Okay, was it an act of rebellion, against the Egyptians? Was it a statement of identification with our underdog status? Was it a sign of the rebellion, of the revolution? If you were, God certainly would know which houses were the Israelites. The angel of death passing through should know. Don's not on the Zoom this morning, but he and I had some conversations during the week about, did the Israelites suffer as well? One interpretation is that the Israelites put that blood up there to symbolize that, yes, they had suffered as much as the Egyptians did. So, but there's quite a lot of commentary about it. But it's something that we just kind of, excuse the expression, pass over as we prepare for the holiday, or as we read read about it. But that was a major statement for them to self-identify, to publicly identify that way all of their households. Because if something went wrong and the Egyptians decided to attack, right there, they would know exactly where all the Israelites were.
Okay. Yes, Steve. And
Oh,
Steve,
well-
and then Pastor Bruce.
Oh, okay. Well, you brought up the question of the sacrifice or meaning of the sacrifice, and we have to recognize that sacrifice was not invented by the Jews. The sacrifice comes from our Canaanite origins that were adapted by us as a people, but it was customary historically, and except the use of the sacrifice changed. The Canaanite gods, or the main Canaanite god, who was El, who is actually, we use that name too, but of course we're intending something else when we use it. But the Canaanite, it was sort of an exchange, you give, the god is not particularly interested in you, but as long as you make it, you give the sacrifice, the things will be okay and you'll get what you need. In our tradition, if I'm understanding correctly, I'm not an authority, I'll have to look for some support on this, I guess, it's not so much in exchange anymore. And our God is in fact interested in us. Not a remote God, it's a close God who has an interest in us, of course, and that was said to Abraham, you are my people, you'll be a multitude. So, as many things in history, we don't necessarily invent things, we acquire them from other places and adapt them to our needs. So again, we're the sacrifice here is symbolic, and the families eat the sacrifice, but it's not so much a payment to a God who isn't particularly interested in us.
Okay.
To get some sort of exchange.
Thank you. Very good. Yes, Pastor Bruce.
Due to, God's, I believe, commandment to do so, that would be I think you have to, for me, you'd have to go to the fact that this was not just something that was supposedly made up just to do. It was something that was shared to do by God himself. So I would go with commandment to that point. But I agree with Steve in a sense that it's symbolizing a sacrifice offered as a substitute, one life for another. And Leviticus 17:11, if we're not there yet, but we'll get there, and it's going to say that's what's going to be said there.
4 years.
Leviticus 17:11. we're a long ways from there, but anyway. But I'm just saying, at some point you've got to remember that that's what it says there, and we can go backwards to this or go forward to that, however you'd like to look at it. But to me, those things intertwine within the entire Torah, and you're looking at the entire picture. I think in this case, it's escaping the judgment. It's escaping judgment. And that's how I would view it. And speaking of which, I'm very sorry. As you can see, I'm very dressed up. I have another memorial service I have to go to shortly. So,
oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I could stay on as long as I don't have as much involvement in this one. So it's I don't have as many things to do or anything like that. I just have to be there. So I'm going to be leaving shortly to go to this. I'm in my office at the church. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, that's kind of what I was thinking about that section of this particular
when the thought, once in a while you get an idea that pops into your head, and I'm going to ask it sort of as a question. When the Mishkan is built, you also have an altar, okay, separate, okay. It's within the entire structure, but it's separate from the Holy of Holies. But when you make a sacrifice, there's a blood ritual that the priest is supposed to do with sprinkling, sprinkling, or I honestly don't know what the hand gesture was. But what crossed my mind is that here a doorway is an entrance. Okay. The altar, the ritual that takes place, is also an entrance in different ways. Is that something that is being implied here? And I don't know if there's ever been any discussion about that. Yes, Pastor Bruce.
I really like that. I think it's very, you can get a picture of that. And Steve was saying earlier that there's the idea of a faraway God or a closeness of God. I think that you get into the closeness of God when you're talking about what you're talking about with the priest. And I think I mentioned this at a Torah. This is one of the few Torah studies that I remember that I've been to before with y'all, all y'all.
Yes.
I've been in here in this one before because I remember distinctly. I think it was with Ruth Ann. I was saying, well, you realize the Catholics get this, and this from the doorpost. And she went, huh? Do you remember that conversation, Ruth Ann?
No, honestly.
Well, that was a couple of years ago. I said,
Probably.
well, the Catholics, they have I'm not Catholic, but anyway, they have the touch the head, touch the, go this way.
Interesting.
As a sign of the quote unquote cross, but it's really the doorposts are like that. And I did have that conversation with you, Ruth Ann, whether you remember it or not. But anyway, it was like 3 years ago, probably, when we talked about that.
No, it's
interesting.
Let's see, what is it? Spectacles?
I don't know the Latin. I'm sorry, I'm not Catholic. I don't know Latin.
No, but anyway.
Just, the idea, it's the idea
in literature that may address that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just but the closest, getting closer to God through the doorways, through the altar, through all that's important. And Steve mentioned that there's far away and then there's close, and that, to me, that's close.
Okay, and the reason I mention that, what has replaced the painting of the blood on the doorpost?
Mezuzah.
And what is within the mezuzah?
You should love the Lord your God with all your heart.
And what is in the phylactery?
The same
thing.
Right.
As this ties in what Pastor Bruce was saying. So
Head.
Now I have to ask this, yes, Rabbi. You see where I'm
throw out the Hebrew word, some of
yes,
you know,
please.
For the sacrifices is korban or korbanot,
yes,
which comes from the same Hebrew root as to draw close.
Yes.
So it goes into, reinforcing the whole theme of what you're saying.
Okay. I just found it curious, and it just popped into my head this morning while I was thinking about things. Please, Ricky, I'm sorry. I
That's okay. Getting to the Catholic gesture, a rabbi is finally saved from it. I won't go to the whole story. And when he comes up and he's with the priest, he does the sign of the cross. And the priest, of course, says something back. And he says, no, I'm checking spectacles, testicles, violet, and botch. Is that awful or is that awful?
It's awful.
Oh, they were on an
Bruce.
airplane and the plane was having trouble landing, and that's when they went through it's a long joke.
It is a long way. She summarized
With
it. Yes.
many different iterations. Yes,
Yes.
right.
Yes. Okay. Well, enough of that question.
Oh,
Any other comments? Yes, Ruth Ann. Ruth Ann, Suzanne.
yeah. I just, if I may be permitted to,
Sure.
my Christian view on this. I was not taught this in church or Sunday school. It's just my own impression. But when I think of the top of the door and the two sides, I think of the Trinity. I mean, that's what it means to me. And then, Marty, when you said about the doorway being maybe, to go somewhere perhaps, then that popped into my head. That's kind of, I mean, in my mind, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost all live in heaven. So that would be the doorway to heaven.
Okay. Very interesting.
Not-
That is
Not in
yeah.
your belief system, but
In yours.
yeah.
Sure. And I think that those are, different ways of looking at the same images. It depends on our education, our beliefs, things like that. And we're going to have different interpretations like that. Anything else to say about that part? Well, what about those people who didn't have a lamb to sacrifice?
They shared with the neighbor.
Or
This.
that's one, yes, or it should be purchased in order to complete this act. Yes, Suzanne.
Yeah, it also said they could use a goat.
Yes, that's another issue. I don't know if you remember, it's been a while now when we was talking about the sheep. And at one time in history, people felt that goats and sheep were very similar, were the same animal, just appearing differently. So I don't know.
The Hebrew word applies to both in some cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all I can say, I think that's an interesting thing, because maybe, I'm not being heretical when I say this, but maybe the animals we call goats could have been also used. I don't know. I just don't know. Anyway, any other discussion about the lamb and the blood? What do we do to symbolize that today in the Passover service?
You mean which of the symbols on the Seder plate?
Yeah, on the symbols. Very good. Symbols on the Seder plate.
Well, the roasted bone.
That's right. Yeah, the shank bone. That's right.
Yeah.
Rabbi, I know the symbol for the egg, it's supposed to be like a new birth and like that, but when was that introduced? Did you roughly?
Well, I smile because you're taking away some of the things that I'm going to be working on in an introduction to Passover Seder.
Okay, I'm
workshop.
sorry.
Right. No, that's okay. That's okay. The egg symbolically, yes, is new life, is renewal, is springtime, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the actual halachically, from the standpoint of Jewish religious law, the egg is actually there as a unit of measurement. Believe it or not.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
It's there because most eggs are approximately the same size. The commandment on to observe Passover, is to eat matzah, is to eat, da, 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 da. So the question comes, how much matzah do I have to eat?
Oh,
Okay? And
Right.
the answer is the volume of an egg. So that's why the egg is actually there on the Seder plate, is so that if you don't like matzah, if your digestive system doesn't work well with matzah, whatever it is, but to fulfill the mitzvah, you have to eat the volume of an egg minimally.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
usually the minimum, question, Rabbi?
Sure,
Usually the minimum volume used for most things,
it's a carrot.
olive.
It's either an olive or a
Right.
carrot. Yeah, but they wanted this
But
to
in
be
this case, it was an egg?
it was a little bit larger than an olive or a carrot. Yeah.
Because that's
Now-
usually the thing that comes up in the Talmud and everything else. It's always, kazait is the expression,
Right.
the volume of an olive,
Uh-huh.
which
Yeah,
is
but
much,
but
especially with a symbolic.
the first reference to the egg, and some people roast the egg as well because they didn't have access to a shank bone or something like that. So it kind of had to have a dual purpose. But the original purpose of having an egg there, not so much symbolically, the symbolism was added later, which happens frequently in Jewish tradition and custom. But it was originally to answer that question, what's the minimum amount of matzah?
Wet or dry?
The egg or the matzah?
Just to get down to the size of an egg. Yeah. Okay. First, Suzanne, then back to Steve.
Yeah, I have a question. Why is lamb not served at Passover dinners or at the Seder?
It frequently is. Growing up, we always had lamb on Seder night.
Oh, okay. Because my first husband was of the Jewish faith, and his family never served lamb. And
It's more expensive than chicken.
Yeah, true. Or
It's more
brisket.
expensive
That's
than
where it comes
chicken.
down to.
It's harder to make for a large crowd than a chicken or a turkey, say,
oh,
Yeah, and then if you're like my household, where Sid likes his meat medium raw and everybody else wants it cooked, it's so much easier to make poultry.
okay. 'Cause
Yes.
even-
Okay. Okay, Steve.
Yep. Oh, just to responding, I'd like to say something. Two things. Response to Susan, with your interest in the Jewish culinary customs, and your experience and most of our experience with Jewish culinary is European culinary.
yeah.
And if you have encounters in Israel,
Exactly.
encounters with Middle Eastern Jews or Sephardi Jews, it's very, very different. What
Very different.
we eat on the holidays,
That's right.
they also don't think much of what we choose to eat. They think this is a joke, but
You can,
like the Persians, I think it's the Iranians even and I might be mistaken, but my brother in Israel has in-laws, has connection with Jews from Iran, and I think they eat the head of some animal.
Ooh,
And that may be on, but they sort of cook it. Yeah.
okay.
yeah.
Okay. The soup and
Yeah.
whatever. But I was going to go back, Marty, to your question about the word that's used for lamb. Okay, and of course
Yes.
I couldn't resist. I had to look up in my dictionary.
Please.
And the word used is seh. Okay. And that is very similar to a word used in a lot of Semitic languages, Phoenician, Ugaritic, and Arabic, but it usually means small cattle.
Interesting.
could the lamb and the sheep and the goat all be the same? And actually, yeah, it sort of means small cattle.
Fascinating.
And any kind of small cattle generic name.
There are
Okay.
some of the older translations, I think Steve's correct, or
Yeah.
his dictionary is correct. Some of the older translations will just use yearling rather than the specific species.
So that would include quite a few domesticated animals that, you know, do
small
food.
Small cattle or young cattle. Yeah.
Right. Fascinating. Yes, Ricky.
For those of you who remember the Fifth Street Deli in Tucson of about
Oh, years ago, the old.
the original, right, the old people, them. I love they had up on the wall that they would make a whole Shabbat dinner for you. And one was so Ashkenazi, so exactly, you know, what I remember. And the other one was unidentifiable to me till I looked and realized that that was the Middle Eastern. So they had two completely, totally different menus for Shabbat dinner.
Yes.
So I like that they were able to cover both aspects of it.
1 year, it goes back a ways. We had to prepare different time. We asked some restaurant to prepare the food. It was a Jewish restaurant up in Tucson, and they made haroset altogether differently than the Ashkenazi.
Oh, sure.
And everybody was saying, "What's this?" It doesn't look, it doesn't taste, it doesn't feel like haroset, and it altogether different. And some people were upset by it, but you know, it depends where in the world you are. You know, and there are two major divisions, but then it depends on what's available where you live. Right. You know, that also has to be taken into consideration. It isn't always that easy. But yes, go ahead.
But what you said about it being, in a way, geographically cultural. I know my father did not do, he was definitely a non-practicing Jew. But he ate kasha, he ate borscht, you know, guess where he was from? Russia, you know, the Pale Settlement. So it was so clear his diet that at first I thought was a Jewish diet was not, it was a Russian diet. Or, you know, that part of the world that had beets.
Yeah. That's what you have to do.
Right.
Any other comments? Steve, I don't know if you did it intentionally or not, but your screen is only shows your name now. There you go. There you go. Now you're back. Now we can see what's cooking there.
My book was on the button here.
Blame it on the book.
Suzanne's cat.
Suzanne, you're in a wrestling match.
Yeah, I just want to say about borscht. I totally forgot about this, but the first time I was at a Passover Seder, they weren't sure if I was Jewish or not. You know, well, back then, you know, my hair was dark brown, and you know, I could pass for Italian or perhaps a Jewish person. But the dead giveaway was they served this borscht. I never had borscht in my life. So I take a spoonful and not knowing how hot it would be, I blew on it.
But with sour cream, did you have a dollop of sour cream?
Well, back then I did not eat sour cream, but it was on the table. I remember people putting it in their soup, and I'm thinking, ugh.
There are a lot of culinary customs around the world. Let's put it that way.
I know better now. But
please, Gail.
I just wanted to mention I had sent an article to Marty and Sue, I guess both, about the vegetarian background on the Sephardic.
Mm-hmm.
The New York Times printed it out, I don't know, a couple, 3 days ago, I guess,
Yeah.
Marty, right?
Yes.
And heavily vegetarian based with the Sephardic.
Yeah.
Whole different thing.
So I think that it's worthwhile knowing. Your taste buds really are developed quite young, and takes a lot of guts over the years to change. Okay.
There are some in Israel where today there are many Ashkenazi, Sephardi,
Yeah.
Eastern European, North African, mixed marriages in that sense, because the Torah doesn't prescribe two seders,
Exactly.
only one seder. But what many in Israel do now is the second one seder is Ashkenazi, rather than blending them, because they want to give credence to each cultural background. So they do one seder with a menu from one seder with the menu from the other, and they sing a couple songs. They don't, when they quote the Torah a couple bit, but they don't go through a 5-hour seder.
Interesting.
My brother has a combined, Ashkenazi and Iranian Seder. And
Right.
So,
Yeah.
well, it's interesting. It's a lot of people.
Yeah, but it is interesting when you see the blending of the two, of any combination. Grace.
Yeah, Grace, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to be in a lot of trouble when I finally get to go to Israel, because I am the world's pickiest eater on the planet. My mother always made lamb, for Seder and Easter, Passover, whatever we celebrated everything in my household. I mean, we weren't traditionally Jewish, but she claims to be agnostic. I don't see it. Anyway, to this day, she loves lamb. And we went shopping and we got a rack of lamb, and she roasted it, and it's perfect. And she loved it, and she wanted me to have some. And I'm like, no, thank you. So I'm sitting over here eating a peanut butter sandwich, and she's having lamb, right? And
was it on matzah or?
It was just, she felt like having it one day.
No, I mean the peanut butter sandwich, was it on matzah or was it on bread?
That's a good question. I think it was just on flat crackers. And I don't like the smell of it. I don't like the smell of it. My dad raised me on, London broil and filet mignon. And we traveled one time. I was really young. I don't know, maybe 5. And we had come down from Massachusetts into some area, I believe it was in Tennessee. It might've been Memphis. And we go into this Grub Shack of all places. It's a restaurant, and everybody was having their meals and ordering, and I just ordered steak and lobster, and my dad was like, no, they don't have that here. And I started crying. They were serving fried chicken and hush puppies and, just different things. And I didn't know what to order because, I knew what I wanted, but they didn't have it at that restaurant. And it really wasn't even a restaurant. He said, well, you can tell my kids not from around these parts. I've always been a picky eater. I can't eat lamb. My dog likes it. My mother liked to give it to the dog. So, it's like, I'm in a lot of trouble because, I've traveled other areas of the world, and the smell and the sensation and the taste of the food, I had a hard time existing. Hard time. It's very difficult, very difficult. I have these, I guess I just heard somebody, it takes time to acquire a taste for it. So I need to start prepping.
Okay, Rabbi, yes.
But 2 things, Grace, if you come to Israel, we'll be glad to accommodate your tastes, needs, and whatever. Okay. So and I have to tell this story. Everybody else is telling their personal stories. So Santa Monica, California, I was the rabbi of a congregation there, and I was invited to the local Lutheran church because they wanted to do a mock or a model Seder or whatever, on some weekday lunch. Their ladies auxiliary sisterhood, whatever, wanted to prepare a Jewish meal, and the pastor and I were going to have a dialogue about the origins of the Passover celebration, how it related to Easter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they wanted to have an authentic Passover meal. So and it wasn't going to be with meat or anything like that. It was just for people to taste, taste some of the things. So we get to this thing where the lady in charge says, "Oh, and Rabbi, what's this chair?" I said, what are you talking about? Charises? I said, oh, you mean charoset? Okay, charoset. So, well, she couldn't say cha, but okay. So I said, well, there are lots of different ways to make it, but keep it sweet. It's chopped up nuts and apples and blended together. Some people put raisins in there. It's usually somewhat sweet and whatever. It will be fine as you're just tasting it anyway. So 3 days later, on the Wednesday afternoon, I walk into the church, and there in the fellowship hall, there's this lovely table that's laid out for people to sit at, and in front of every plate is a Waldorf salad with on a bed of lettuce, on a thing of lettuce. There's some chopped up nuts and some apples, and and your choice of dressing. And
That's cute.
Said, well, nice try. Thanks for the attempt.
Okay, I'm going to let Ricky and Gail, because I want to move on. There are a lot of things
I want
here.
to know who grew up with peanut butter and jelly and who grew up with cream cheese and jelly.
Both.
I grew up with peanut butter and jelly.
Both.
What is down
I grew up with both.
I don't
my
like peanut butter.
uncle, my father's brother, had the cream cheese and jelly. My father had the peanut butter and jelly.
Okay, good. Yes, Gail.
I just have a real quick word of advice for Grace when she goes to Israel. Stay with the falafel and stay away from the shawarma, because the shawarma really has a definite odor you're not going to like. So stick with the falafel. You'll love it.
Eat lots of yogurt. Have a lot of dairy in the morning.
Okay.
Cucumber and tomato
Well,
salad.
in Torah, getting us back to Torah, in verse 5, it's very important that you would select a lamb without blemish. And that phrase is going to come up again and again for all future sacrifices. Okay? You pick the best to give to God. And that's going to be coming up, not just with the lamb, but also with other things brought for sacrificial purposes. So just as an aside, remember this. The other, and the fact that it's a yearling male, as the rabbi pointed out. And then if you read on, it says that you can do this. It says you can take it, okay, from the sheep or from the goats. Okay, so just to point out that we're going to get to a very interesting thing in a few weeks that I found, which will be of some interest to some people. And anything about
why?
Yes.
Why slaughter at twilight? That's the next. You shall keep watch over it for the 14th day of the month, and all the congregation of Israel shall slaughter it at twilight.
Okay, why do you think?
Keep the stars from coming out.
Well, if you have to paint the doorposts with
the blood.
Blood, you want to do it before midnight, before the angel of death comes.
But they could do it during the day, but then that made me think that then the Egyptians would see it and wonder why they're painting their house with blood.
Possibly.
Yeah, but,
Well, they were a little busy during the day.
Yeah.
And
Making bricks.
comment?
Okay, Steve.
Yeah,
Please.
yeah.
I
Actually,
just want to say, I know
again,
everyone wants to be helpful and they have their ideas, but please raise your hands and wait to be called on, because there are people who are doing that and we're overlooking them. Steve, please.
okay. And actually, interestingly, what's translated as dusk in Hebrew is slightly different. And I'll explain how.
Please, yes, it's
Okay.
important.
It actually, the expression, which is still used in modern Hebrew, like derived from the Bible, is ben arbaim. Ben arbaim, which literally means between the two evenings. Okay. And here I'm getting and so what does that mean exactly? And I'll use Hertz for this. He explains it. According to the Talmud, the first evening is the time in the afternoon when the heat of the sun begins to decrease. So maybe about 3 o'clock. Okay. The second evening commences with sunset. So that's actually, and that's, I guess you could call that dusk, right? You know, that's not, that's dusk. Dusk is sort of that in between time. So it is ben arbai. It's that not quite altogether evening, sort of in between, late afternoon, late afternoon.
Okay.
And,
For some reason, while you're
Josephus-
speaking, Steve, I have Hoagie Carmichael in my mind. It's okay.
that one's going over my head. Sorry. Yeah.
Da, 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 da. Twilight time.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and Josephus relates that the Passover sacrifice was offered from the 9th to the 11th hour, which is, I guess that's Roman time or something, but okay, between 3 and 5 p.m. Okay, so
Okay,
precise time.
thank you. Suzanne, you had your hand up for, I think.
Yeah, I just wanted Steve to clarify for me, what was the 3 p.m. time meaning again?
Well, the expression, you know, what's translated as dusk in Hebrew is a little bit more complicated. The expression used is ben arbaim, which, you know, there's a noun construct in Hebrew when you can sort of make a pair of anything, like ayin is one eye, a naim is a pair of eyes, yadayim is a pair of hands. So erev is evening, arbaim is a pair of evenings. So what does that mean? You know, 2 evenings or between 2 evenings. So the earlier evening is 3 p.m. and the later evening is later. And they're talking about that in between time. Is ben arbaim, between the evenings.
Oh, that's
Thank you. Thank
very,
you.
very interesting.
Any other comments about the evening? What about if we go to verse 6, why wait? You shall keep watch over it until the 14th day of this month. And all the aggregate community of the Israelites shall slaughter it at twilight. We were discussing that.
But that's the full moon. That would be the full moon.
The full moon. Very good. Very good. Now comes up another question. And that has to do with the Roman Ides. We only speak, okay, for March. Okay, but every month has Ides, and it's the middle of the month. Did the Romans pick that up from the old Semitic custom?
I could ask my grandparents and see, but you know,
I
they're
don't
the
know.
earlier Romans. I don't know.
I just don't know. And so I start wondering, it just crossed my mind. And too
Wouldn't
much
that,
thinking, too much thinking.
but couldn't that just be the celebration of the full moon? I mean, I'm always out there on full moon nights.
But
I mean,
the
I
full
just
moon
thought,
does not appear
I mean,
in the middle of the month,
oh,
except
the
in a lunar
You're
calendar.
right. Yep.
Okay.
I'm merging my calendars.
Okay.
Sorry.
So you have to take, I just started wondering about it because of what it represented. Anyway.
Does anybody know what is the word Ides, like the Ides of them? What is the word Ides? Where's the origin of the word?
I'd have to look that up.
Yeah.
A lot of things pop into my mind, and that's why I have to be careful sometimes.
Ites, the ITES means like the descendant of the children of.
Right,
I don't know what
Ides are the middle of the month. It's the middle of the month.
But I don't know what the etymology of the word is.
I don't have a dictionary in front of me.
All right.
But it is homework now.
Gotcha.
Since I brought it up, I have to do more looking into it because it popped into my head just as we're reading all of this. Since I know that, but that we're dealing with what Ricky said, a lunar calendar, but at the same time, was this picked up in other cultures that come later? I don't know, because
Marty,
of what
you'll have to stay
the
after
eyes
school.
represent. What? Yes, David. You're muted. There you go. What?
Marty will have to stay after school today.
Oh, I have to. Yes. Okay. Anyway, so we discussed all that. Now, verse 8. Any comments about that? One of the things I found in my reading was that there is at some point there was a feast of the matzah and a feast of the lamb. And I have to, and that at some point this was combined.
Right.
So, Rabbi, since you know about it, could you say a few words about it?
Well, the 15th day, which again, that's the full moon,
right,
was previously celebrated as Feast of the Unleavened Bread, the Feast of the
right.
Month. And then at some point, all of these other, in other words, predating the Passover and Exodus experience. They did have some kind of a celebration related to unleavened bread on the 15th, on the new month of Nisan. Then all these other events and all these other overlays of the story and the narrative and the mitzvot and the commandments and the sacrifices were added on. But yes, originally, so we were told to collect the lamb on the first day of the month, and sacrifice on the 10th day of the month, and then there's the 14th, which the night of the 14th into the 15th is the Exodus, and then the 15th itself was already being celebrated, and they're all kind of compacted together over the centuries.
Okay. So this just adds another level of confusion for everyone. Okay, that's just me with my questioning all the time. So it says if we sort of, we already discussed the blood on the doorposts and lintels of the house, but in verse 8,
Hey,
there's a prescription here,
yeah, there's a menu.
a recipe, if
A
you will.
menu. The menu.
The menu.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ricky. You wanted to
Well,
say
I'm wondering
something.
why the bitter herbs. We understand the unleavened bread, but what are the bitter herbs suggesting?
Well, what herbs do you use?
Parsley, but I use garlic with my lamb.
Okay. Anything?
Ricky, what do you mean by what is
Cooking
what are
it in bitter herb they should be roasted over the fire with unleavened bread and with
herbs, bitter herbs.
eat it over you shall eat it roasted over the fire.
That becomes the question for the biblical scholars. Is this a later addition, ADD, addition, or was the menu for this particular holiday of unleavened bread, was it also to eat it with certain vegetables, which collectively were known as the bitter herbs?
Ooh.
Ruth Ann.
I have a question about the matzah. I mean, as a child, we were always taught that matzah was invented when the Israelites left in such a hurry that they didn't have time for the dough to rise. They haven't left yet.
No, that's right. It's not that it was invented. It's not that it was invented in the middle of the night when they left hurriedly.
Yeah.
Apparently, if we take this in historical chronological context, apparently they had some kind of a celebration already that used unleavened bread for one reason or another. We're not really sure what it signified, but that's not to deny the story of that when they left in the middle of the night, they didn't have time for the dough to rise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that doesn't.
So they just had more matzah.
Yeah, that doesn't introduce matzah. So it depends if you're following the Manischewitz or the Streitz or the Yehuda story,
which will come up.
Their marketing campaign, right?
Because there are several interesting commentaries that talk about different authors. I was going to save it for a little later, but that there are combinations. Ricky, I have to blame you in part for a book that you gave me.
Okay, which one? I can't see it. Oh, isn't that amazing? I love that book.
Okay.
Oh, could I make a comment about the matzah, though?
Oh, sure, please.
Relevant.
Please. And then Gail. Leave some time for Gail.
You know what, and please, Rabbi, let me know if this makes any sense or you've heard this story, but supposedly matzah, again, historically was actually a customary food of the slave class.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little bit like their hardtack. So like in the Civil War, but because easy to prepare, quick to prepare,
Right.
Yeah.
So it was kind of slave food, but then the added dimension was added that pre-Exodus, and it makes a good story, but it's just sort of an added layer to what was already established as a food.
Okay, please, Gail.
Yes.
You had your hand up before.
I want to address this actually to Ruth Ann, because she's also a bread baker like myself. Now, picture this, Ruth Ann. You're not allowed to have any leaven, anything in the house, which means no yeast, correct? So you leave Egypt and you have no yeast in your possession. Sometime down the road, you want to make bread, right?
Okay.
And I'm only involved with this right now. I'm doing sourdough starter. I've got a culture living in my refrigerator, and I'm feeding it every week. And I'm thinking about how much work's involved just to keep that going. But if you don't have any yeast, I mean, that's going to be something that you're really, really going to want down the road. And how do you get it? Because you've destroyed all your yeast.
Yeah, please, Rabbi, and then Grace.
Okay, so when we hear the word matzah or unleavened bread, we automatically think of, joking before about the stripes and the Manischewitz and the Yehuda. We think of buying it in a box, and it's it's this square kind of a sheet. That's not the unleavened bread or the matzah that our ancestors ate or whatever. And if Grace, again, when you come with us to Israel, there's always a stop somewhere, whether it's at a Bedouin tent or some restaurant or an outdoor dinner event where they have kind of an upside down pot, and you lay like a little piece of pita on top of the pot, and it flattens out, and you pull off a little piece, and you scoop it in the hummus or the tahina or whatever it is, and it's not perfectly shaped, kind of thing. It's just like a real thin. I don't even know how to best to describe it. You have to picture it. Steve, you have a better way of describing it?
No, that's
Yeah.
There are various versions of pita. They're giant ones, they're little ones.
Right, exactly. It's very,
Ones,
very,
yeah.
very, very, very thin. And it's not so totally structured as to have 36 sheets that go in the box. So we have to kind of change our visual image.
Okay, Grace, and then Ruth Ann.
Okay, so your question, if I'm still understanding it correctly, was what was the significance of the bitter herbs, right? Right? Is and the commentary suggests that perhaps it was to recall the bitterness of slavery.
Right.
Yeah, but that's definitely later on.
That comes later.
That
comes later, and it is in the Haggadah, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Ruth Ann.
Oh, I was just going to say, from this, now my understanding, I think, of the matzah, I'm thinking of it a little bit differently now, and we'll get into that more when once we're leaving Egypt. But I think I have a new commentary for a couple weeks from now.
Okay, good. It depends on how fast we go.
Well, that's a couple weeks, a month, you know.
So we'll be close to the actual date. That doesn't happen too often.
No.
So in verse 9, it says, do not eat any of it raw or cooked in any way with water. Don't boil the meat. Okay, don't steam it or anything. You want to roast it. And the entire animal over the fire. So in essence, you are making a sacrifice. If you think about some of the things later on that we're going to read in Leviticus and other the methods of doing rituals with the animals. And then you better stuff yourself completely, okay? Because you're going to burn it the next morning. Why? Why burn it?
Wasn't the smell pleasing to God? Wasn't that one of the things?
It's one possibility. Any other comments?
Yeah, did Ricky say the burning caused it the odor?
Well, there were some things that were burnt that were the smell was pleasing to God. I remember that expression.
Yeah,
So
that's what I was. I didn't hear you say that, but that's what I was thinking.
Okay.
Ruth Ann.
I was just thinking, I mean, God knows what's going to happen. Okay. And yes, you're not supposed to leave a fire unattended, but probably, I mean, God might have been thinking that that's exactly what the Israelites were going to have to do. Anything that was left, first of all, he probably didn't want them to have anything left over because he knew they weren't going to have another meal for a while. Okay, number one. And number two, like I said, if they had any leftovers, they could have thrown it on the fire and still left. It wasn't something that they necessarily had to watch. Whereas any other means of disposal, they would have had to stick around and, I mean, look what happened, they left and, the Egyptians ended up following them anyhow. So they had to get out of there quickly.
Okay. Yes, Ricky.
Couldn't it have been a deploy that, like, if there's something roasting, maybe the Egyptians would think they were still home, rather than having taken off?
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Neither do I.
But it doesn't say to completion, burn it to completion or anything.
Yeah.
But I like it just resonates me with that, that there's part of it. It's not just for yourself, it is also for God. That's what resonates. Yes, as part of the sacrifice. Yes, Rabbi.
Yeah, I really like what Ricky said.
Yeah.
It's what we call a chidush, of a new interpretation that I'd never heard before. Yeah, you don't want to leave any indication that you might be coming back.
Right.
Okay. So the food's still there by the fire for when we come back from this experience. But the other is that the animal, again, whether it's a goat, whether it's a lamb, whatever it might be, the animal that was roasted was done so for a sacred, holy purpose.
Sacred reason.
So even that which was left over still maintained its taboo-ness, its kedusha, its holiness. So you wanted to make sure that it was treated respectfully and properly, rather than just left out as garbage, which to them, to do this act of sanctity was to bury it.
Okay. Very, very good. Yes, Michael.
In regards to, if I can backtrack a little bit, in regards to the bitter herbs, we do know that the slavery and the Pesach refers to that later on, but nevertheless, the Israelites had suffered bitterness from the beginning, and so that might play a part in that.
Probably. Thank you. As far as okay, I guess we have to now read verses 11 through 13. So if somebody would like to read verses 11 through 13.
Yeah, I can do that.
Please.
This is how you shall eat it. Your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it hurriedly. It is a Passover offering to the Lord. For that night I will go through the land of Egypt and strike down every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and I will mete out punishments to all the gods of Egypt. I the Lord. And I will mete out punishments to all the gods of Egypt, I the Lord. Okay. And the blood on the houses where you are staying shall be a sign for you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, so that no plague will destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt.
Okay. Any comments?
Why did I stumble over that half a sentence? I will mete out punishments to all the gods of Egypt, I the Lord. It's a comment.
Okay.
It doesn't say, saith the Lord.
Do you remember I said it at one point, watch the pronouns. When it's a capital I or a capital H or a capital Y, emphasize that word.
I, the Lord. Okay.
Because you'll have to take, I will mete out punishment to all the gods of Egypt. I, the Lord.
But it doesn't say saith the Lord. It's, so we don't know.
No, it says I. It's personal.
Okay,
It's
so okay, so it's
Yeah.
third. Okay.
So by doing that, it is making it more real. You can relate to the anger, the how much emphasis you put on it is the way you imagine God would be putting the emphasis in what he says. So it's theatric, you're emoting, but at the same time you're getting into the feeling behind the words. So I think that's why the comma is there before the I. Take a pause.
Okay.
Emphasize the I, emphasize the L. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it'll make more sense to the audience. Yes, go ahead, Rabbi.
Yeah, it's also a literary style.
Yeah.
And we're going to see it frequently
Yes.
through much of the rest of Torah. This is one of the first times that we've seen it, that either at the beginning of a sentence or at the end of the sentence, it's an affirmation and an emphasis.
Yeah. So, but the comma is there specifically for
Right.
you to take a pause, right?
Exactly.
A period is a little longer pause. That's why on a typewriter you have 2 spaces for the following a period and 1 space following a comma. Okay, it's a real pause, just like in music with a rest. Okay, right, Michael? You have different periods of rest.
Yes, yes, Marty.
Yeah. So, yes, Suzanne.
I take note here when it says against the gods of Egypt, little g gods.
Yeah.
And I believe that these little g gods are real entities, that they were part of God's divine council, and that he had, back in the days of the Tower of Babel, when we got all the different languages, it indicates there, and I believe it's in Deuteronomy 32. I think it's verse 8, where these beings from the divine council may have started off okay, but they became corrupt, and they desired to be worshipped and be like God. And I believe that's where humans came up with all these, came to worship all these different gods like Baal and Moloch and such. So, and it says that he's going to execute judgment against them. Now, we don't know what kind of judgment that God meted out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that God would just say he was going to give judgment on an entity that did not exist. So I think too often we forget about the supernatural realm, or if you want to refer to heaven. We forget about that realm and all the beings that are there and what's going on there and their interface with us here on earth.
That is a very interesting interpretation. I hadn't heard that before, but I think it's sort of been partly I hadn't read any of that information before. So I think it's a worthwhile exploring.
The Unseen Realm by Dr. Michael Heiser.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments? I assume it's Ricky. Yes.
Yeah.
It was just addressed to me. So few people use
Yes.
two spaces after a period.
Yeah.
When you type, when you do a double
I do.
space on, you have to hit space, and you get your period
No, I know,
automatically
but
inserted.
very, very few people use it. And when I
I
was
know.
doing the schmooze, I can't tell you how
That's due to
I just had to
texting,
go through and put the extra space in there.
and some don't even put the punctuation.
Don't tell me
Cummings,
about
Nor
it.
does the Torah. So
that's right.
Right.
That's right. So, but in English, which you raise an interesting question, Rabbi.
Mhm.
So how, if they don't use the same punctuation, they do, how is it that over the years they were able to emphasize certain words in their thought, just thinking the words? Because they didn't have all the speedy things we do today.
Based on the trope, on the chanting,
right?
The diacritic marks of and because you need, for Hebrew grammar, you need to know which syllable gets the emphasis, and all that. So the musical, the melody helps you understand. And if a comma is supposed to be there, there is definitely a musical pause, like a rest in the music, music notation. And if there's a period, your voice goes down.
Right.
Rabbi, when did the trope start? How far back does that go?
Masoretic, 8th, 9th century.
Interesting.
The ones that we have now, there probably was a different, and there's different trope for different books and different, different generations and different places.
Sure.
Etc.
Fascinating. Yes, Rabbi Ricky.
Yeah. The lack of the punctuation, somewhere I read, who knows, with my brain. And where will you find the Lord? In the heaven? Or where will you find the Lord? In heaven? Is it a question mark? Versus is it a period? Totally different. So how did they decide which was which? Well, anyway, it doesn't matter how they decided. But
Well, the real answer is probably majority vote. The scholars got together and said, "What do you think? What do you think?" But the legend is that it was all unanimous, that they were all divinely inspired and had the exact same answer.
Well, that's the Septuagint, where all 80 of them agreed in Greek. Yeah.
Thank you, David. You can read your David's comment on this. But in today's age, many people don't punctuate in the text messaging. So it's whatever, and sometimes they don't reread what they text, and spell check sends a different message completely.
Coincidentally,
go ahead.
Coincidentally, there are major moves afoot in modern Israel to completely change the language and drop some of the singular, plural, masculine, feminine, forms, because people don't use them that much anymore anyway. So there's an assigned committee from the Knesset, from the parliament, looking to completely rewrite the rules of grammar.
That's going to be interesting, because only because I can see you're going to have the traditionalists versus
and you're going to have to learn then 4 separate grammars.
That's
right.
You
have to learn the Torah's grammar. You have to learn the rabbinic grammar.
Yeah.
You have to learn then the Eliezer ben Yehuda, what we thought was modern Israel grammar, and now you'll have to learn a 4th, modern contemporary Israel grammar. Crazy.
And next year it'll be another, depending on which one goes on. Anyway, any other comments before we start on, let's read some more, not for, but get back to our discussions here. Did you think anything about when you're eating the meal, your loins are girded?
Yeah.
Okay, and your sandals on your feet and your staff in your hand, and you will eat it hurriedly. Only people who've lived in New York or Chicago or any major city can relate to this at lunchtime. Okay. Because there is no time. And sometimes at breakfast, they'll just grab a Pop-Tart. No, but I'm saying there are people, and that's breakfast. And while they run on, so they're now getting fired up. They know they have to do all of these things in haste. Some things, I hate to use the term, afoot.
Yeah, I think they're getting ready to, eat and run, as we say.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're getting, you got to be ready. You got to eat this stuff and you got to be dressed. You got your staff, you got your shoes, you got everything. Your shoes are on your feet.
That's right. Get your packs and, pack everything that, you need to take and be sure you're ready to go.
And get your go bag.
There you go.
So, Marty?
Yes. Yes, Steve.
Just a story to share here.
Sure.
I'm just reminded of it is, of course, I was in the Israeli army and in training, boy, do they make you eat fast. And
yes,
I don't know if that's all basic training. Maybe it is. Maybe it's other. Because my experience only extends to Israel, but they would give you like minutes to eat.
Right.
Because I guess it was assumed that's wasted time. We've only got 3 months with you guys, so we're going to crowd in all the training we can, and eating is wasted time, and we're not here, to watch you relax and eat. So boom, you were in and out of there.
Well, that is why we have fast food. That is why, no, seriously, if you think about how much time you saw your grandmother spend in the kitchen,
right,
preparing dinner, versus what we do today, taking something out of the freezer, popping it into the microwave and running away. And, and then coming back, gobbling it down, run away again. There's some, so that'll come up later. That's another discussion in and of itself, because we are not designed to do this as an animal, if you will. Our animal function. Steve can relate to, the biochemistry and like that for proper digestion, and how long that food is going to sit in that stomach because of vigorous activity. Okay. Yes, Suzanne.
His description in verse 11 reminds me of a shepherd. And a lot of the people we've read about so far have been shepherds or goat herders, or that's what it reminds me of. That's all.
And I'm glad you brought up shepherd. I was going to save this for another time, but due to time here, I just wanted to mention we had been speaking about shepherds and sheep, a nation, of sheep herders. That's really what the Hebrews were. They were sort of like Bedouins of the desert, just and so if you look up in a thesaurus about sheep-like, it's very interesting. you have different interpretations. If you think in terms of sheep-like, the more positive, attentive, loyal, compliant, respectful, deferential, subservient, devoted, docile, dutiful, faithful, law-abiding. But then on the other side is acquiescent, amenable, at one's beck and call, biddable, complacent, controllable, duteous, governable, honoring. It can also be almost to the point of extinction in one's clutches. This is how the word can be used in the English language. I don't know about other languages, but observant, tame, well-trained, regardful, willing, resigned, reverential, yielding, and in another negative way, wrapped around finger. But this is the word, these are all synonyms for sheep-like. So when we look at that, some of these are going to fit the Israelis, the Israelites in a number of ways, depending on the circumstances that it is related in Torah. So I just wanted to point, and I left out a whole bunch more, because it is interesting when you start to look at our interpretation of certain words and what goes through different people's minds when you start saying they're sheep-like, all right, or they're shepherds. And I wanted to point that out, and it's going to come up again in the future. The other,
Marty, Grace has her hand up on that.
Oh, okay. I was looking up a word. Yes, Grace.
Okay, so I looked up sheep-like.
Yeah, there it is.
I found it interesting because one of the definitions provided is a person regarded as a protected follower of God.
That is one, yes. Yes. So it's just it depends on the context. Thank you, Grace. Now, this is not just a recipe for food, okay, because food is also, and Grace, it is a reverential thing, right? When we prepare the meal, and some people say the grace before the meal or after the meal, okay? And so it's not just that there's food. We forget about that when we're too busy. When we're too busy, we forget that whether it was a plant or animal, it was sacrificed so that we can survive. And so we forget that the prescriptions that are going to come, this is like the start of how to do things, okay? And be very mindful of what you're doing. That's why my grandmother was able to be so mindful when she was doing all the cooking for several hours a day, as opposed to popping something in the microwave. There are kids out there today that still do not know that a hot dog or a hamburger or anything was once a living thing. And they don't understand that the bread that they're eating it came from the grain. and all the work it took to prepare all of this. There are kids out there today that don't even know where plastic comes from. Okay? That the petroleum was once a living thing many, many years ago. Yes, please. Gail, I'm sorry.
Yes, if you want to have an interesting conversation with your grandchildren, assuming they're at least 5 or 6 years old,
Mm-hmm.
next time you sit down at the dinner table, lunch table, whatever, ask them, where did this come from? How many things were responsible for bringing this to your table? Start with the plant, you go to the trucker who brought it to the grocery store,
Exactly.
all the various things. It's really, really interesting. And my grandchildren who live in Colorado are of the age where they can actually, verbalize this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But they made a list, and it was like 20 things of people.
Yes.
Steps, right.
Processes that actually were responsible. And it was very enlightening for them. So actually more adults should do it too.
When I think of it, we're raising a generation of kids that do not know enough information. That's all. It's only what they find on TikTok.
Well, it's a matter of speed though, too, Marty. Things
Yeah.
have to be done in a different speed
Yeah.
than they used to be done. So
Exactly.
I can't blame it on the kids. It's adults
Yeah.
are the same. It's one of the reasons I became a vegetarian, because I actually sat down and thought about the entire process from the very beginning. And that's,
Well stated. Well
And,
stated.
and Marty, I don't think it's just this generation. I think it's been a lot of generations since people moved predominantly to the cities. I think city people just don't get it, period. Because it was the same thing. I remember taking my kids, to a farm and I didn't know any better. I mean, I was, raised in the city. It's the city dwellers that don't understand.
Yeah. Well, they're not directly involved. Sure. A good point. Everyone had good points. I'm sorry for today. It's just that I'm just on a different tear today, so I apologize. Anyway, the other thing at this point, I know we only have about 5 minutes to go, but since Ruth, I don't know what the temperament is. If everybody wants to just finish up with verse, go on in the discussion, or if you want to end here and pick up, because we can sort of tie this in with the meal as well, because it's so important, because the very first phrase, and we have been called the people who remember. I don't know if it's because of this phrase, or because of the celebration going on each year. But think about it for next week. I think it's better, because there's a lot of discussion that we can have over just verse 14. Any other comments? Well, I apologize for interjecting so many crazy ideas into the discussion today.
And thanks to
No, it was
Wendy for
great.
letting me stay for the whole meeting.
It's one of the things that I just once in a while it's worthwhile to think about some other things like music and food and art and everything else in addition to what we're reading.